Hi, welcome to Dig Into China. I'm Dong Shang. Thank you for tuning in. Your support means the world and plays a crucial role in the YouTube algorithm. Liking, sharing, and subscribing not only show your support, but also help YouTube recommend my videos to a broader audience. Thank you very much. Today, let's discuss family planning and delve into the pitfalls of the three-child policy. 3 years ago, on May 31st, 2021, the Beijing government issued the three-child policy, allowing couples to have 3 children in response to the challenges posed by population aging and declining birth rates. Since then, this announcement has sparked widespread discussion. However, most discussions have predominantly revolved around the economic aspect, advocating that a higher birth rate translates to a larger labor force, ultimately fostering economic growth. Hence, encouragement for childbirth stems primarily from this economic viewpoint. Let's start with a brief overview of China's historical birth control policies. In the early years of the People's Republic of China, the country initially adopted pro-natalist policies following the example of the Soviet Union. Around 1949, the population of mainland China was roughly 500 million. By the first national census in 1953, it has risen to about 600 million. The second national census in 1964 recorded a population of 723 million. By the late 1960s, the population had reached 800 million. And by the late 1970s, it was close to 1 billion. However, due to low labor productivity at the time, the population increase did not necessarily yield corresponding economic benefits. Instead, it could lead to food shortages and a decline in living standards. Thus, in 1982, the Chinese government changed its stance, transitioning to a policy of birth control known as the one-child policy, which limited most Chinese couples to having just one child. This marked the widespread promotion of family planning across China. However, during its implementation, disturbing violations of human rights emerged, including forced sterilization, abortions, and contraception, especially prevalent in rural areas, essentially treating people as if they were livestock to be managed. Population data reveals that despite enforcement of the one-child policy, China's population continued to increase. However, after 2000, the rate of growth significantly slowed down, especially post-2010. What's more crucial is the demographic shift in China's population pyramid, characterized by a narrower base and a larger middle to elderly age group, signaling a typical aging population structure. The reality of China's aging population and the slowing population growth has led to government to gradually relax birth restrictions since the turn of the century, initially permitting a second child and now allowing for what's termed the three-child policy. These measures, whether under previous family planning policies or the current relaxation, treat people not as individuals but as voiceless tools without dignity. Formerly aimed at population control due to resource constraints akin to managing livestock, the shift now focuses on encouraging childbirth due to labor shortages, treating the populace as commodities. Upon careful analysis, it's worth considering which segment of the population the three-child policy will truly encourage to have more children. Given the increasing costs of raising children in urban areas of China, the urban working class, regardless of the policy shifts, is unlikely to have more than 2 children due to financial constraints. Let's examine the cost of raising children and the income levels in Chinese cities. According to an article reposted by mainland Chinese media outlet The Paper, in Shanghai, the average annual expense of raising a child exceeds 70,000 yuan. Many netizens argue that this figure is underestimated, but let's use it for discussion purposes. Now let's compare this with income levels in Shanghai. According to statistics from 2 years ago, Shanghai boasts one of China's highest income levels, with an average disposable income per capita of 70,000 yuan. If we consider a total disposable income of 140,000 yuan for a couple, it means that half of their combined income is required just to support one child. Therefore, for the urban working class, it's not just challenging to raise 2 or 3 children, even raising 1 child poses significant financial strain. Who stands to gain the most from the loosening of birth restrictions? There are 2 main groups. Firstly, those with low child-rearing costs, who can afford to raise multiple children regardless of expenses. They are likely to feel confident about having 3 children. Secondly, the wealthy individuals with significant cash flow who can afford to ignore the costs associated with raising children. In essence, those who can comfortably afford to have 3 children are either extremely poor or extremely wealthy. Conversely, the middle class, the working class, may struggle to afford more children. Let's delve deeper into who can afford to have children, the poorest and the wealthiest. The wealthy are always a minority, so regardless of their childbirth decisions, they can't sway the overall population structure. Conversely, the majority are the poor. Thus, if the poor have more children, it would significantly alter China's population dynamics. Typically, those in lower economic strata are limited by their family background, education level, and financial resources, leading to restricted perspectives. This demographic is the most susceptible to control and indoctrination due to their limited exposure. If the Chinese government can exploit this new birth policy to cultivate a large population that's obedient but lacking in critical thinking, it would be an ideal scenario for the Chinese Communist Party. However, let's consider China's ruling class. Are they subject to the same birth policies? Certainly not. They established the rules which are intended to govern the controlled classes, not themselves. Let's put aside the discussions about the children within marriage and solely consider the biological aspect of offspring. Members of the ruling class currently face no restrictions on the number of children they can have. Aside from children born within marriage, there are numerous instances of extramarital children and mistresses within the Chinese ruling class. This phenomenon is widespread. Individuals in prominent positions in China essentially have no limits on their offspring. Additionally, the legal concept of monogamy does not apply to them. While I won't delve into specifics here, this information is essentially common knowledge now, and it should be relatively easy to find using online search tools. Currently, the over 100 families currently controlling China follows a dual-track family structure as described. Our focus should shift to the broader structure and the system of marriage and childbirth in the country, revealing fundamental aspects. Both the ruling and the ruled classes seemingly adhere to monogamy, but in reality the ruling class faces no restrictions on the number of spouses or illegitimate children, often practicing polygamy. Conversely, the ruled class traditionally follows a system of monogamy with 1 husband, 1 wife, and 1 child. This stark contrast in family structures highlights another form of duality in China, the dual-track system of family and marriage. Let's consider China's privileged or ruling class, where those in power are primarily male. While these individuals publicly present themselves as adhering to monogamous marriages behind closed doors, they often have numerous illegitimate children with mistresses, ranging from second wives to multiple mistresses. These mistresses, exclusive to the elite, essentially serve as female slaves. The children born to these mistresses also have certain property rights and stand to inherit significant wealth from their fathers. Moreover, they may have the opportunity to relocate abroad and gain citizenship in free countries. This scheme mirrors the ancient slave system. In that era, female slaves were obligated to serve the rulers, including engage in sexual activities. Their offspring were entitled to a share of the ruler's wealth and granted the status of free citizens. Essentially, children born to female slaves and their masters were elevated to the status of free citizens, no longer bound by slavery. Thus, the rules of ancient slave society and the underlying norms of present-day Chinese society appear strikingly similar. don't they? Indeed, this concept encapsulates the essence of the family system. The English word family derives from the Latin word familia. Its original meaning doesn't pertain solely to the modern nuclear family structure of one husband and one wife. Instead, it encompasses all individuals belonging to a household, including family members, slaves, and other household-related individuals. Thus, the original notion of family encompasses the male and female heads of the household, children, slaves, and the offspring of slaves, all constituting a complete family unit. When we examine the origins of the word family, it perfectly mirrors the family structure of China's ruling elite. This structure comprises a core consisting of the male and female heads of the household, accompanied by a plethora of mistresses and their illegitimate offspring. Together, these components form a household unit of China's ruling class. However, some may question, don't ordinary Chinese people have property rights? After all, they have personal bank accounts, they can buy a house and invest in stocks. Why then are they considered propertyless slaves? This question is easily answered when we extend the timeline. We realize that Chinese people's property rights are not sustainable. From a historical and a societal perspective, anything unsustainable or transient essentially doesn't exist. In other words, if your property could be confiscated at any moment, if your home could be raided and your future could be uncertain, then whether you have property rights or not makes little difference. In this context, so-called property rights are merely a facade. The only individuals who truly possess property rights are free individuals and their masters. So, what is the essence of property rights for ordinary Chinese chiefs? We can understand this form of property rights as an incentive mechanism, a tool to motivate the slaves to labor. This incentive method has specific historical precedents, one of which is ancient Rome. In ancient Rome, many slaves actually possessed some personal property that they could manage themselves. This is clearly documented in ancient Roman legal literature as the peculium of slaves, a unique form of property theoretically belonging to the slave's master, but which the master could allocate a portion to the slave as their personal property. Essentially, this resembles a mechanism similar to incentivizing employees to work harder, aiming to stimulate labor productivity and spur economic growth within the slave system. As for these slaves, after creating a certain level of wealth, they had the potential to overturn their status. If these slaves possessed sufficient talent to generate significant wealth, they could potentially attain their freedom and no longer be dependent on any master. Under such an incentive mechanism, the vast slave population would strive to labor vigorously, hoping to eventually gain freedom and break free from their slave status. The game rules mirror those of China. The majority of Chinese citizens work tirelessly to earn money. But what's their end goal? It's to obtain foreign citizenship, acquire foreign assets, and immigrate abroad. Then, these former slaves undergo a transformation, becoming middlemen who manage the labor of other slaves on behalf of their former masters. This reality reflects both ancient Roman society and the current state of Chinese society. From family structures to social organization and the entire incentive mechanism, the systems of the Roman Empire and modern China share striking similarities. Examining China's family dynamics, marital norms, and overall societal mechanism, let's circle back to the underlying purpose of the so-called three-child policy. Primarily, it stems from concerns among plantation owners about a potential decline in the number of laborers on farms. This apprehension is shared by both plantation owners and the farm management, fostering a desire to boost childbirth among the labor force. But does this strategy hold water? Can it genuinely serve as an effective incentive? As previously noted, since the introduction of the three-child policy, only two groups dare to expand their families: the exceedingly affluent and the exceedingly impoverished. Hence, from its inception, this policy was crafted to encourage greater childbirth among the lower echelons. The more impoverished individuals have, the more advantageous it is for the ruling class. Expanding the lower class may indeed increase the labor pool, but this growing segment could pose future instability. China is rapidly transitioning its industries, and many of the burgeoning lower class may struggle to secure stable employment. Consequently, they might resort to informal or unlawful means of survival, contributing to societal challenges. A surge in such individuals makes effective governance challenging and raises the risk of grassroots unrest. Therefore, the three-child policy aiming to bolster the lower class labor force may inadvertently fuel social instability. It reflects a policy that appears astute at the first glance but could ultimately prove to be short-sighted. Hence, China's current three-child policy primarily serves as a population growth strategy aimed at fostering a sizable workforce from the lower echelons. However, if China aims to cultivate a greater pool of talented individuals, it must prioritize granting genuine citizenship rights to its populace and treating them with dignity and equality. This approach is essential for nurturing high-caliber talent. Additionally, China should consider opening up its borders to immigration. Experience shows that countries with restrictive immigration policies eventually encounter challenges related to aging populations. Conversely, nations that embrace immigration tend to alleviate the severity of aging population issues more effectively. Yet, it's clear that the Chinese Communist Party won't pursue the aforementioned strategies. Granting genuine citizenship rights and opening up immigration would entail substantial political restructuring, currently unfeasible. As for the purported three-child policy, its probable outcome is the proliferation of a larger cohort of lower-class individuals, fostering more impoverished and uneducated citizens. While this may serve the ruling elite's interest, it would prove detrimental to Chinese society at large. Thank you for watching. Please like, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel. Just click the subscribe button right here. I'll see you again shortly. Until then, be well.